Without even meaning to, the music I've been making lately keeps coming back to this 6-note scale. It's a weird scale because it doesn't really have a name. Technically, it's called the hexatonic minor scale, but I've never heard anyone use that term. I had to look it up. It's the pentatonic scale, which is a 5-note scale with an additional note. So if you think of the pentatonic scale, the minor pentatonic scale, and you reintroduce the second note, you've got the 6-note hexatonic minor scale. Let me show you what I've been doing with it. This kind of a harmonic texture works perfectly for electronic and ambient kind of textures because all of those notes kind of can percolate in the reverb tail and in a spectrum of delays. You can kind of just get lost in that texture. That's what I'm doing here. Playing just little combinations of notes and little riffs and just letting them drift into the ether. I also have this Rhodes sound, which is my electric piano instrument for all DAWs and operating systems called All Rhodes. I have this Rhodes instrument running through a filter, Ableton's auto filter. And then I have the cutoff frequency of that filter controlled by an expression pedal. This allows me to control the brightness. I can close the filter almost all the way down where it's essentially muted, and then I can sweep it up. So it's essentially allowing me to do a wah-wah pedal effect or control the filter, as well as do volume swells. So here I'm establishing the root, which is G. This is a G minor 11 sound. I'm playing G down below, and then I'm playing a G minor 11 voicing on top. And I'm repositioning and inverting this chord to kind of create this pattern, this riff. There's a melodic aspect to it. And the thing about G minor 11 is that it's actually this 6-note scale. Well, actually, the thing about any minor 11 chord is that it is just this 6-note scale in disguise. If we stack up, in this case, G minor 11, from the root, we have G, the third is B flat, the fifth is D, the seventh is F, the ninth is A, and the 11th is C. If If you compress all of those notes so that they're not stacked and cascaded, and instead they all appear in sequence in the closest possible position, you'll see that this is just this 6-note minor hexatonic scale we've been talking about. By making a selection of just approximately 4 of these 6 notes at a time and treating them as kind of subsections of this chord, as smaller portions of this chord or scale, and by taking each of those smaller portions 1 bit at a time, 4 notes at a time in this case, we can create this kind of moving, grooving feeling of harmonic motion. Even though, in a broad kind of theoretical sense, we're just swimming within the body of water that is G minor 11, aka this 6-note minor scale. Here, I've kind of reduced the texture so that we're actually no longer choosing smaller portions of 4 notes at a time from the 6-note set. I'm actually now choosing 2 notes at a time. And each of these selections, each of these smaller portions, are perfect fifths. I'm just improvising right now. Throughout everything I'm playing in this musical journey here is improvised. So I'm kind of molding this chunk of clay here. Sometimes you find something and it works. You're compelled to record it and build a song out of it. In other cases, it's just a stop along the road to whatever it is you decide is going to be the idea you stick with. But really, if we remove the whole notion of record or produce, or if we just even eliminate the entire paradigm of recording altogether, and we just imagine that there's just some existential, universal tape recorder just documenting every single moment, that's kind of what I'm playing for in this case. What I really like about this scale is that it sets a mood that has a sophisticated sound and a jazzy kind of vibey sense, because there's enough harmonic content in the scale itself. You've got 6 of the 7 notes. Whereas the pentatonic scale kind of keeps you very much rooted in kind of the soil of music. No wonder that the pentatonic scale is basically the backbone of blues and rock and all those kinds of styles, where there's not a whole lot of loftiness to be had. The 6-note scale gives you enough of a vocabulary, gives you enough notes to work with, to really paint vivid, lush, sophisticated pictures with the music. When you have all 7 notes of the scale, the traditional major, minor scales and the modes, there's all of a sudden this pretty insane obstacle course that you have to navigate. It quickly becomes a labyrinth. It instantly becomes a labyrinth, where there's all sorts of notes that you have to be careful to avoid, otherwise the whole kind of harmonic system starts to shut down or become just very atonal and hard to listen to in a lot of situations. You really have to kind of master the labyrinth in order to navigate those full harmonic waters. And honestly, it can be exhausting sometimes. So on the one hand, you've got the pentatonic scale, which is very much rooted in simplicity. It's down to earth. It's direct, it's straight to the point, 5 notes. And then on the other hand, you have the full 7-note scales, where all of a sudden the vocabulary is big enough and the concepts are full on that you really can't just speak your mind anymore. You have to kind of speak in a dissertation format. You have to really choose your words wisely. In the middle is this Goldilocks zone, the 6-note scale, where it's simple enough that you can be right to the point, but you have enough of a vocabulary in terms of the amount of notes that the colors you can create are rich and have a kind of relatable sophistication to them. I was grooving, I was feeling an idea, I was kind of locked in there to some degree. But then comes the issue of I need to be able to play to a drum beat or some kind of metronomic pulse so that I can multi-track. The tempo, whatever it was that I was playing initially when I was just improvising on the Rhodes, that was the tempo. That was what I was just organically feeling. This is what you miss out on when you don't have a live drummer or a live band with you, because when you have a live band and you have humans playing together, I could just keep playing that, and the drummer would just also feel that groove and that pulse that I was feeling in the best case scenario, and they would just join in, and we would kind of ride that wave together. When you're dealing with a computer and you want to play to a grid, you've got to do all sorts of bending over backwards to try to split that difference. And honestly, at the end of the day, at least in my experiments and trials and errors, I've never found a way that really quite worked. But we keep trying. The rhythm track started as a kick drum and a shaker loop. I then added a ride cymbal, a backbeat in the form of a rim, where it's actually a sample of a high-pitched rim and a low-pitched rim played together. And then there's a little peppery, very quiet ghost snare. These are all samples I recorded on a drum kit that I've got in the other room. And I'm actually working on a more detailed, fully fleshed out drum kit that has this lo-fi texture and quality to it. Could be perfect for house and electronic styles, drum and bass, hip hop, all that stuff. But I wanted to also have round robins, multi-layered velocities, and all that detailed stuff that you get out of a more full-on drum library beyond one-shots. So keep an eye out for that. That's going to be coming soon. So I went on a whole journey getting that drum track worked out just to kind of get back to where I left off when I started with the drums, kind of to recapture the vibe that I had initially instigated. Process is now kind of clearing your mind and taking all of those small ideas that you improvised spontaneously and trying to kind of create a nice spread out of those ideas in the form of a take, an actual recording, so that we can hopefully flow from one idea to the next, kind of sampling and tasting each of the things that we kind of got a feel for in the initial improvisation. So here I have those 4-note smaller portions of the 6-note scale that I had initially improvised with. I'm using that as kind of the body of the Rhodes part here. And then I'm sprinkling in higher parts in the right hand, kind of some little 2-note Rhodes fills, almost treating it like a guitar kind of riff in a way, some little short little guitar notes up there. And this is also just a classic thing to do with Rhodes. I'm playing it in 2 configurations. One, I'm holding F and playing C to D underneath. And then the other one is the same kind of idea, but lower, where I'm playing C on top and then playing G to A underneath. What's exciting about approaching music through a harmonic perspective is that you get to slowly watch the whole notion of harmony kind of disintegrate as you keep molding an idea. Because before long, your perception of that harmony becomes melodic. So in this case, even though I'm playing those 4-note smaller portions in the form of chords, my ear is now aligned to hearing that melodically, going from D, F, and A. D, F, A, F, A, F, D, F, A, F, with little sprinkles in between. At the end of the day, harmony is just multiple melodies occurring simultaneously. The same way that a chorus is just a collection of individual singers. If you're listening to all this theory talk and thinking, hexagon, trapezoid, what is this guy talking about? I wish there was a simpler way to get the vibes into my chords. Then I've got just the thing for you. My Chords That Vibe MIDI packs. Volume 1 gives you a direct route to the harmonic realms we are exploring in this video, covering every key and every possible root motion. Volume 2 kicks things up a notch by introducing dominant harmony into the equation, which pairs perfectly with this hexatonic concept and will take you directly to the most jazzed out corners of vibe land. Even if you are well versed in these harmonic ways, these chord progressions will present you with novel chordal pathways. There are a lot of MIDI packs out there, but I promise you that the treasures you'll find in Chords That Vibe Volume 1 and 2, you won't find anywhere else. This stuff is so highly refined that not even AI would be able to figure out what's going on. Check it out. The link's below. The bass is a lot of fun on this one. Lately I've been using the bass with a very bright tone with not a whole lot of the low end dialed in from the pickups. This kind of produces a more Jaco Pastorius-esque kind of tone, and that's what I've been playing around lately with. But when I played that here, it immediately felt too thin. It felt too funky. I needed a sub-bass quality to it. So I switched up the tone pretty much immediately. And that put me instantly into kind of this 90s house, jazz fusion-y kind of realm, which was pretty inspiring right off the bat. I just rolled with it. What I'm always hoping for when I create a track, especially when I'm multi-tracking it in a DAW, is that every layer that I add enhances and adds to the vibe enough that each subsequent layer, every instrument that I add afterward feels easier and easier. It feels like it just falls into place more and more. Doesn't always happen that way, but it did on this one, because the bass, just as I was vibing to what I recorded on the Rhodes, and even with this simple drum pattern, every approximately 16 bars, I kind of just intuitively felt where the next variation should go. It's kind of variation 1. And the only two notes I'm using here are G, and then D, the 5th, and then G above that, which is just the octave. So we're using two notes, G, D, and then G again. So everything is still coming from that 6-note G minor hexatonic scale, that 6-note minor scale. I go through phases where I'll get really fancy and start doing all sorts of wild harmonic things and trying to make beats out of it or tracks out of it, and going down rabbit holes where I create odd time signature drum patterns and stuff like that. And it's always tons of fun, but it always ends up circling back to something like this, where it's just one chord, one vibe, with just the reverb and atmosphere. For me, that's always been what's captivated me most instantly with music is reverb, overtones, the harmonic series. And I've added a third note, F, the 7th. So now we've got G, D, G the octave above, and then F below that note. And now we've got another note, A, the 9th. A and F are just the upper and lower neighbors to that high G note. So you can think of those two notes as even just being kind of the most accessible alternative or variation or melodic kind of understudy to that G note up above. Variations can be so simple in that way. Just look for the smallest and most accessible possible change. It might feel like it will have no impact on the listener, but it will. Starting to get too fancy for my own good here, and the rhythm is starting to suffer a little bit. But that's how I know the next variation is trying to bubble up and make its way through. There it is. I'm now doing the upper neighbor to that G note, A, twice. As the variations progress, everything is still built off of, on beat 1, hitting low G. That's the #1 thing that the bass line's got to do, especially in this simple, understated kind of context. When the bar loops back around or the loop starts back around, hit that root right on beat 1. Doesn't have to be complicated. Everything you do after that is on you. You can get as crazy as you want, as long as you come back and check in with that root on beat 1 at some regular interval. So now here I've swapped out that second A, G for B flat A, which is just moving both of those notes up 1 in that scale. This kind of thinking makes it so intuitive, and so it makes the path to developing a musical idea so clear that you're always just looking for the smallest possible change that you can make to the existing idea. And if you can make 50 small modifications throughout the course of a track, that ultimately equals so much more than one huge, obvious, overt change. But of course, there's no right or wrong way to approach any of this stuff. So, as always, do what feels right to you. And at the end of the day, we're talking about music. We're turning music into language, which means we're distancing ourselves from the true nature of music, which is a unspoken, invisible phenomenon of sound. So all we're ever doing is trying our best to describe the indescribable, the ineffable. I liked this variation here. It got fancier and fancier and fancier, and then I just boiled it down to G down below with F below that, the 7th. Very simple, very satisfying, and very deep and low. And then I incorporated the 3rd, B flat, and C above that G. So it's all still very low, kind of the opposite of what the first handful of variations were doing. I liked this call and answer that kind of emerged from this low variation of the bass line, just G and F and then back to G, is that I went up to the octave above and walked down from G, F down to D. By ending on that D in a very purposeful, downbeat oriented way, it almost gives the impression that it's the 5 chord. So we're almost hinting now at the system of harmony that emerges from the 7-note scales, but we're not. It's not. It's just the implication of that 5 chord. It's still just all G minor 11. And if you were at this point inclined to spice it up with other tones or some kind of key shift, what's making it very easy to avoid that is the fact that there's this beautiful reverb, ambient, lush kind of texture percolating in the back as all of these tones are bouncing around in that reverb tail. And so if I do anything that goes against that set of notes, all of a sudden that reverb tail is going to get polluted essentially. And to me, in this kind of a musical context, the purity of that reverb tail and that atmosphere and the sound of that cave is worth more to me than any kind of rotation of the harmonic Rubik's Cube. And now here is an extension of that implication of harmony idea, where now it not only implies the 5 chord, but the bass line has another aspect to it, another part to it, where it goes from D to then F to G, then C. But the important aspect is that it ends on C, which gives it this feeling of being the 4 chord of G minor. But again, it's not. It's just kind of a shifting of the orientation of this cloud, this harmonic cloud, to the surface that it's hovering above. At this point, I've got enough material that I want to shape it a little bit in a production sense. So I added an auto filter to the bass to kind of take a little bit of the high end and the attack away from it and give it a little bit more of a lo-fi and a little bit more of a subby texture and character. I've also added echo or delay to the Rhodes. Now that the idea is kind of solidified, we can let those repetitions even further percolate and combine in that reverb tail. I've also added sidechain compression and linked those compressors to the kick so that I get that classic kind of pumping action on the Rhodes and on the bass. At the end of the day, these don't really do anything to alter the music. They just frame it in a certain genre or style or era aesthetic. It's a place to have fun with this stuff. Not that the music making isn't fun in of itself, but I like to approach the production with a attitude of being a fashion designer or something like this. You're decorating, you're ornamenting. It's also an opportunity to take an idea and make it more immediately understandable to a particular group of listeners or a hypothetical audience in your mind, because you can meet them halfway by presenting the sounds in a familiar context or in a familiar form, in a sound design, production, mixing sense. At this point, we've got the trio: Rhodes, bass, drums. We need a lead. We need an instrument out in front of this band. I used Ableton's analog synthesizer. And I kept it really simple. It's just a square wave. But there's a few things that to me are essential to make it sing, to make it speak, to make it not sound like a vacuum cleaner, as can often be the case with a synthesizer. Those things are, number one, it's gotta be heavily doused in reverb. So I'm sending it to the same reverb send as the other instruments so that it gets to coexist in that same cloud of harmony. On top of that, I've got 3 elements of the synth, 3 parameters of the synth that I'm modulating. The filter, the cutoff frequency of the filter. Very simple. This allows me to control the brightness of the sound in time. I'm also controlling the vibrato amount, and I'm controlling the vibrato rate, or the speed of the vibrato. And as I play, I'm able to do this in real time because I have one expression pedal rigged to the frequency, the cutoff frequency of the filter. I have another pedal rigged to the vibrato depth, and then the mod wheel is rigged to the vibrato rate. Having all of this control, for me, makes me feel like I have permission to just sit on one note, because I can really get a lot of juice out of that note by controlling that combination of parameters. In short, it just makes it sing. I've got an entire video about how to make a synth sing. I'll put the link in the description. I approached the synth the same way I approached the other instruments. We started with an initial idea, and then we slowly morphed that by varying it. Whatever we did in the first variation, we try something that goes in the opposite direction. At this point, the vibe is so thick that the synth just had a very simple job. It just has to cut through with some choice notes, and it'll just kind of make the whole track shine. I just stuck with what I played initially, which was this group of 4 notes that I placed at 2 different points in the scale. The first one starts on C and then goes down to G through the scale. So C, B flat, A, G. And then the second one starts on A and then goes through this 6-note minor scale. So G, A, F, D. So just 2 sets of 4 notes that just go stepwise through the scale. I experiment with playing it long and then short, which is a great vector of contrast that you can almost always implement no matter what type of instrument or what part of the track you're creating or playing. Long, short, duration, length, legato, staccato. There's then this other high note that is actually kind of a variation of those Rhodes embellishments up in the right hand, playing F and then C, D. then start playing with this idea rhythmically, placing it at different points in the beat. Playing 16th notes, 8th notes, and displacing them. I started synchronizing the synth with that melodic aspect of the Rhodes chords that I had mentioned. How the chords at a certain point cease to be harmony and start to have a melodic component that shines through. I decided to highlight that with the melody. This is all happening intuitively and kind of instinctually. This is another way that you can build melodies, is focus on just an area of 3 or 4 notes in the scale, which then leaves you with the notes you didn't use. And then you can build the second variation out of those notes. It's kind of like melodic compartmentalization in a way. We're gonna play with this set of toys, then we'll go play with this set of toys. We'll paint with these colors, then we'll paint with these colors. Then maybe we'll find a way to merge the two compartments. At a certain point, I start to realize that the vibe is so relaxed and lush and spacious that the synth doesn't need to shred on top of it. It doesn't need to blast like a saxophone or a trumpet. You can just play some choice notes, maybe more like a guitarist. Although guitarists are actually maybe the most notorious blasters and shredders out there. By the end of the synth improvisation, I've used a lot of the tools that I might initially go to melodically, harmonically, sonically, and I turn to the pitch bend. While I'm playing with the pitch bend, I'm starting to be careful to make sure that the frequency, cutoff frequency of the filter stays low, so that the whole sound kind of stays very subdued, blends with the muted bass, the ambient Rhodes, the LoFi drums. Everything that I've played here is just combinations and selections of those same 6 notes. 6 notes to rule them all. If you dig these flavors, don't forget that you can get this Rhodes instrument as well as over 200 chord progressions that have this kind of vibe on my website, jaronlopez.com. And while you're there, you can check out the other very neat things I'm offering to the other vibe heads of the internet. You'll find my preset packs, sample packs, MIDI packs, and more. It's here on my website where you can also book a lesson, which are held over Zoom. We can jump into any of the topics you see covered here on the channel, as well as musical subjects beyond the scope of the channel. And if you'd like for me to add to your music by recording live instruments or MIDI parts or contributing production elements, you can book me as a co-producer or session musician. You'll find links below that will provide details and instructions for booking. And if you want to support the channel and get access to a continuous feed of musical materials, join my Patreon. Catch you next time.